Tired of waking up hot and uncomfortable? Start sleeping cool on the Tempur-Breeze by Tempur-Pedic. It's engineered with a revolutionary cooling system that pulls excess heat away from your body to help you sleep deeper all night and wake up more refreshed every morning. During the Tempur-Pedic Summer of Sleep, save $500 on all Tempur-Breeze mattresses and experience your coolest sleep this summer with our best Breeze savings of the year. Learn more at TempurPedic.com.
Hey guys, it's Allie. Welcome back to Infertile AF, the podcast. This is episode 122 called Melissa and Erik. Today's episode is sponsored by Medfertil by ELAN Healthcare. ELAN Healthcare is a small, women-owned and led Canadian business dedicated to the research and development of natural health supplements for male and female reproductive health. Medfertil is a once-a-day prenatal dietary supplement for couples planning to or struggling to conceive. This prenatal is enriched with vitamins and minerals, scientifically proven to increase your chances of fertility. The Medfertil for Men and Women combo package is on sale now. So if you're planning for a healthy pregnancy and you want to start Medfertil today, go to elanhealthcare.ca and use code Allison15 for an extra 15% off. Again, that's elanhealthcare.ca, ELAN healthcare.ca, and use code Allison15, ALISON15, for an extra 15% off. Thanks, Medfertil. Guys, I want to tell you all about Green Chef, the first USDA-certified organic meal kit company. Green Chef makes eating well easy and affordable with plans that fit every lifestyle. Whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, or just looking to eat healthier, there's a range of recipes to suit any diet or preference. Ingredients come pre-measured, perfectly portioned, and mostly prepped, so you can spend less time stressing and more time enjoying delicious home-cooked meals. I can vouch that Green Chef is easy and delicious. This afternoon, I made a recipe called Veggie and Bean Stuffed Peppers. Everything came portioned in the box. The instructions were super easy to follow, and 30 minutes later, I was eating a really yummy, low-carb, plant-based meal. And I also had leftovers. So guys, give it a try. Go to greenchef.com/90infertileaf and use code 90infertileaf to get $90 off, including free shipping. Again, that's greenchef.com/90infertileaf and use code 90infertileaf to get $90 off, including free shipping. Green Chef is the #1 meal kit for eating well. Thanks, Green Chef. Okay, guys, today I am talking to my incredible guests, Melissa and Erik, who you might know on Instagram as Live Child Free. And they are 4 years after making the decision to live childless, or child free, as they say. We're going to talk about how they got to this point. And first, they're going to tell us about their infertility journey, which included lots of negative pregnancy tests, IVF, and an operation that Erik had to have that had so many complications that he ended up in the hospital for 25 days. And then we're going to talk about the pivot that they made when Melissa finally sat down and asked herself, how many more years of my life do I want to give to this heartache and this roller coaster ride? And at that point, I felt like I didn't want to give any more years to it, she says. So this is a conversation that does not end with a baby. And I love sharing these conversations. I think it's so important to share these stories and the people that decide to pivot and live child free. And we are going to get into all the different terminology: child free by choice, child free not by choice, childless not by choice, and all that stuff. So please sit back and listen in. And thank you so much to Melissa and Erik. So without further ado, this is Melissa and Erik's infertility story. Hi, guys. How are you today?
Good. How you doing?
Hi, it's so nice to be here.
It's so good to talk to you. I'd love to start at the beginning with you guys. Tell me, how did you guys meet and how did you get together?
Well, we met many years ago. We've been married for almost 10 years, but have been together much longer than that. So it was in our late 20s. we met, we were both living in the DC area, and we were set up by a mutual friend. So she gave Erik, she asked me, can Erik have your number? And I was like, sure. I was trying to be like more ballsy, like open to new things. Okay. Like, blind date, sure. She did show me a picture and showed him a picture, but then we met up we talked on the phone for a while, and then we eventually met up at a restaurant, and here we are now in our 40s.
Okay. All right, Erik, what's your version of that?
Yeah.
Actually, she got it almost exactly right.
Nailed it. Okay.
Yeah, she nailed it. Sometimes she leaves out a couple parts, but she got it this time.
Did you guys know right away that you were into each other?
I think so.
Yeah. Well, actually, we talked on the phone the very first time we talked. We talked for like at least 2 hours.
Yeah, we had a lot of phone conversations before we actually got our schedules together.
Yeah.
Because we were really busy. So I think we were both really interested in each other. And, there were some things about each other that was different from other people we dated. So I think we clicked pretty early on. It wasn't long before we were exclusive.
Yeah.
And then when did you talk about getting married?
Well, we talked about getting married quite a few times. We lived together first. And then, but we dated for like 8 years before we got married. So, it had come up a lot, but it took a while.
One of the natural kind of progressions, I guess, as couples, as they decide they want to spend the rest of their lives together, is talking about their family and what the future is going to look like. Did you guys have discussions like that about whether or not you wanted to have kids, or, kind of where you wanted to live, and what were your like future plans?
So I'll jump in with that. So one of the things that she didn't mention is that when Melissa and I met, I had a daughter, and she was obviously from a previous relationship, and she was born with pretty severe special needs, and she eventually passed away.
Oh,
and
so sorry.
Well, thank you for that. It was very difficult, very traumatic. And Melissa, met my daughter and spent time with her, things like that, while we were dating earlier in our dating stage. And so she was with me and knew me and all that when I went through all that grief. So she knew, and I knew, I was not in any real big hurry to like go down that path again. Because for me, the idea, a lot of people have the idea of like when they have a kid that it's all going to work out and everything's going to be great. But that was not my experience. My experience was, hospitalizations and nurses and special needs and
round the clock care.
Yeah. And so I was not, unfortunately, super keen on going back into that world again, which I think that's understandable. So it wasn't necessarily that I was going to say it wasn't that I didn't want to have kids, but I just was not really interested in thinking about it, which is one of the reasons why it took us so long to sort of finally settle down and get married, because in my mind, I think like one of the reasons why I wanted to get married was because I was ready to start having kids or, start a family. And I just wasn't ready for that.
And you knew how much I wanted to be a mother.
Right.
So you wanted to be comfortable with that, I think, before we tied the knot.
Yeah.
Okay. That's so interesting. Coming from that background, you're exactly right. And I love that you said that, Erik, like people think you have a kid and it's just going to kind of work out. And you were coming from such a different perspective. So that like kind of complicates things from the get-go, right? Or like layers on, a lot more feelings.
Yeah. And it's because it's not common the way that I was thinking about it. It was sort of an added layer of sort of weirdness for me, because Melissa, she was very adamant that she wanted to have kids. And I was like, that it doesn't always turn out the way you think, like,
right.
And I was gun shy.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
So what happened when you guys finally did decide to start to try?
So it was in 2011 and we had just gotten married. And so we decided, let's start trying and get rid of the birth control. And I was really excited. We had just gotten married and I was like, everything's moving forward. You have that feeling of things are fitting into place now. And my future dreams are happening. And it was really exciting to start that process. But we were trying for about 6 months, I think, when I was 34 at the time. 34 and a half or so. And so after about 5 months, I went to the doctor just to an RE to see, is there anything going on? You know, I just wanted to know earlier rather than later. And they didn't see any issues. Everything looked good. So he just said, let's have your husband come in next. So maybe a few months or so after that, Erik went in for the sperm analysis.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when we found out that there were some issues with, did you want to speak to that, Erik? I don't want to.
No, go
Okay.
ahead. You got it.
With the semen volume. So the quality was good, but the volume was really low.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, you know, I think it might have even been a year by that point since we started because we had to switch insurance and all this, but we went to a different RE and he basically said, your only option is going to be to do IVF with ICSI.
Okay.
You might as well skip IUI, skip trying naturally. It's not going to work.
Okay. So how did you guys feel when you got that diagnosis? And Erik, how did you feel when you got the test results?
When I first got the diagnosis of the low volume, sometimes I need Melissa to be my memory. Was I really that bothered by that?
The thing is, he was in
It's
the
so
middle
funny.
of-
Isn't it funny? You forget all these things and like dates and specifics.
Well, and
I
so
know.
much happened after that.
Right.
It's like, oh.
I get it. Yeah.
He was in the middle of law school, so there was a lot going on. And I think at the beginning, there was some stress associated with it. But at the beginning, I think I was more the emotional one. And when we got that diagnosis of like, oh, you're going to have to do IVF with ICSI, I just was so upset. And I felt like my world was crashing down on me because with Erik's history and the trauma he'd been through, I thought, well, he's never going to be okay doing this.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to think that there's a higher chance of, possible birth defects or other issues. And so I know that the statistically that's very low, but when someone's been through something, you're thinking about the worst possible scenarios when you've already gone through the worst scenario,
Yeah, that makes sense.
I was like, he's not going to want to do this. And I just suddenly just felt like, everything crashing down on me.
But that's not really how I was feeling.
Yeah. I think you were a little more distant from it at that point. And then that same doctor said, well, because I was in that appointment by myself, he was like, because you're having all these feelings, you're so upset and you're not sure if your husband's going to be okay with that. I'm going to recommend that he go see this urologist within the same medical group who specializes in male infertility. He's really great. Why don't you go see if there's anything he can do first and then revisit this later if necessary? And so that kind of calmed me down a little bit. And I shared that with Erik. And I think right from the get-go, he was okay with going and seeing, if there was anything that doctor could do.
Okay, so I went to the urologist and basically he did what's like a sonogram type of deal and told me that the reason why the volume was low was that I had a blockage in my seminal vesicle. And the seminal vesicle is basically what, your testes produce sperm. The seminal vesicle produces the rest of the fluid that comes out, when you ejaculate.
Okay.
And so that was the reason for the low volume.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically just said, I see the blockage. This is something I can fix. An outpatient sort of procedure. It's not going to be super involved and you should be good to go.
Okay.
And so at that point, I was like, okay, cool.
Right.
Like, we figured out what's going on. It's not like she said, it's not like the semen are, not good quality. It just wasn't a whole lot of them.
Okay.
So
yeah, we were like, this is great news.
Yeah, you're like, we have answers. Awesome. All right, cool.
Yeah, he could do this quick outpatient procedure and we could be good to go. It's covered by insurance because it's called urology. Mm-hmm. It's not called infertility. And so we were like, this is great. And Erik, didn't take him long to decide to do it. He was all for it. So
yeah, because you got to remember at this time, we kind of skipped over the part of like, I was gun shy and hesitant about kids for a long, long time. But as Melissa and our relationship grew and I realized that I wanted to, be with her long term, I had to be okay with the idea of trying to have kids. Mm-hmm. So at that point, I was already on board with we're going to do this. It's because I don't want it to seem like I was gun shy at this point. Right. At this point, I had already made the decision, like, we're going to try. So when that decision and the doctor was like, okay, you have this issue with your seminal vesicle, the hesitancy of like, I don't really want to do this anyway, that actually wasn't occurring. I was fully on board with moving forward, trying to have kids. So like you said, when we heard that, it was like, oh, okay, this is all you need to do. All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
Right.
We even went on a vacation right before that procedure because we were like, let's go on a vacation, take a break, and then we come back, we'll do this. And we were feeling super hopeful and great.
Okay. I feel like I'm predicting it's not going to go as planned from the tone in your voices.
It's yeah.
So what happened when you got back?
So we had the procedure. And I remember he basically said, like, I think the procedure was on a Thursday. And he said, I think he said basically by Sunday, you should be able to, resume a normal sex life and everything should be good to go.
Yeah. He was like, once you're feeling good after a couple of days, just start trying again.
Yeah. And so anyway, what happened was he did the procedure. And I remember when I woke up, I felt kind of weird and didn't feel well. But he was like, oh, that's normal, yada, yada. He said, you should be fine. But he said one, thing, which was don't get constipated. And I just remember that. And one of the reasons I remember it is because even now, that's not really a problem for me. I have the opposite problem.
Right.
I go too frequently. Constipation is not something I ever experience.
Okay.
But
you said you wanted the details.
Yeah.
Yes. I told you, no such thing as DMARD.
So as you can sort of guess what happened, I never felt well. And so for the next, I would say like 2 weeks, I felt weird. I was having, bouts of constipation and lots of pain. I even went to the emergency room one night. Did I stay overnight? I think I did.
I don't think so. But he had a fever and they were like, if he gets a fever, you have to go because it might be an infection.
Yeah.
So we did that. Then they said there was no infection. But I mean, it was 2 weeks of constantly calling the on-call doctors, going to the store to get things, him being in increasing amounts of pain.
Right. And you're like, shit's not right. Like something's going on, right?
Something's clearly going on.
Right.
Yeah. But I didn't know, I had no idea what it was, but I just knew it. And I thought maybe I just wasn't healing as fast as I needed to or something like that. Anyway, long story short, about 2 weeks later, like the pain is just excruciating.
Oh no. To
the point where like, we were just like, let's just go to the emergency room. And his abdomen felt hard. And he had looked at me at one point that night and was like, am I going to die? And
oh God.
And I was like, we're going back to the hospital right now. We are going. And he was even having like, it's walking really slow. We get in the car and we get to the emergency room and they realize that he has abdominal pain. They immediately take him back. They do imaging. And then our lives just changed because doctors rushed in. They had already started pumping his stomach, giving him high pain meds. Then they rush in and tell me he has to go on emergency surgery. There's air in his abdomen. He has a perforated bowel. Oh. So he is completely septic. He's in septic shock, which is
my God,
fatal.
Right.
And he was in and out because he was on pain meds. So he was kind of in and out of consciousness. And they were telling me all this. I'm trying to process it, but they said he has to go in now. He's going to be getting a colostomy because we don't know where the perforation is. We have to let it heal. And at that point, I didn't even know what a colostomy was.
I did.
But Erik did. And then I was like, when they explained to me what it was, I said, well, is this something he's going to have the rest of his life? And they said, usually they can eventually reverse it but it's not a guarantee. So at that point, I am just, every time he's out of it, I'm sobbing. I'm just completely a wreck, terrified that he's not going to make it. And if he does, he's going to have a colostomy bag for the rest of his life. So it was extremely traumatic.
Yes, that is. So, okay. So you went in for surgery, Erik, and what happened?
So basically what happened was, they had the surgery and, I ended up in the hospital for 25 days.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I was in, obviously in intensive care for a few days and then
for 2 weeks, you were in the ICU
because of the infection.
Yeah.
I mean, because sepsis is your whole entire body is infected. And so the first 4 days he was on a ventilator and basically in like an induced coma.
Oh my God.
Because, it's kind of touch and go those first few days. They're trying to get your body to heal or come out of the infection. You're on like 4 different types of antibiotics. You have, he had tubes coming out of everywhere.
Oh my gosh. That must have been terrifying.
It was absolutely terrifying. It was so like he said, he was in the ICU for 2 weeks and then he was able to get, bumped down a level for the remaining 13 days. And then we went home finally.
Yeah. And obviously I had a colostomy bag and I had to wear that bag for a year.
Wow.
So, and eventually, the doctor said that it might be reversible or it should be reversible. And so basically what happened is a year later, I had reversal surgery, which, so I'll just explain basically with a colostomy, what they do is they take a piece of your large intestine, they cut a hole in your chest and pull a piece out. And so you remove your solid waste into a bag.
Right.
The bag is attached.
Yep.
And so with the reversal surgery, they open you back up and then sew the pieces of your intestine back together.
Okay.
And hopefully everything works out.
Right.
Well, so I had that and that was successful. So now I'm able to.
Wow. It was successful. That's great.
So that was an enormous relief that day, a year later.
Yeah. So that's also, got to affect your relationship and intimacy and all that, right? So
100%.
There's another layer of complications.
Yeah.
God, you guys have been through so much already.
Yeah. And then, amidst all that, there's still this elephant in the room of infertility because that's
right.
We were going through infertility. That's how we ended up in the situation. But yet we're totally focused at that point on survival and Erik getting healthy again.
Right.
But obviously the conversation around kids would still occasionally come up. But there were moments where I just felt like it's never going to happen for us. Like, how could it happen after this?
Understandable.
Yeah. So it was definitely difficult. The intimacy was difficult. Erik was having to deal with a whole new body system and adjust to that, but not totally mentally adjust to it like you would if it was permanent.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing about it is like, it was supposed to be temporary. So I didn't want to fully dive in and embrace life with a colostomy bag because I didn't want to have a colostomy bag. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. Like there's certain people, for a lot of people who end up with them, getting that bag, it increases or improves the quality of their life tremendously. It's because they had something like Crohn's disease or some other thing, and having the bag makes them have closer to normal function. That wasn't my experience. My experience was I was, using the restroom normally, and then all of a sudden I had to have this bag. So I kind of hated it.
Yeah.
So if you go on the message boards or whatever, it's people, oh, I'm so happy I have this. And it just never fit for me. So there was this disconnect for me where like, I hate this thing and I don't want to learn to live with it unless I have to.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So you're like holding out hope that this is just going to be a temporary thing. So once you finally had the reversal and it was successful, how long before you guys got back on the train of trying to have a baby?
Probably another year.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's the conversation never left. There would still be times when we would talk about other options. We had conversations where we talked about adoption or we talked about third-party reproduction. So we talked about other things occasionally, but we still were still healing from what we had been through. For me, a lot of the trauma of what we had been through kind of I just started to feel it after he had the reversal surgery, because up until then I had been just holding my breath and kind of surviving. So for me, I needed to go to therapy and really deal with some of the effects of that experience. But at some point within the next year, Erik brought up and suggested, well, maybe we should look into IVF and be open to that. And which really kind of surprised me. I wasn't really expecting us to ever go back to a fertility clinic after everything we'd gone through. But him saying that kind of allowed me, I kind of felt permission to like think about that and feel hopeful again. And then I thought, well, that's more my body that's going to have to go through the more invasive things. So I would be okay with that. Whereas I never would have been okay with him doing anything ever again that was more invasive.
Right.
But I thought IVF is going to be mostly me.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided at that point to go visit a doctor. We were back in Los Angeles because we'd moved from another place. And we were like, okay, well, let's go to a doctor and look into this. And we decided to go through with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like this jar of hope reopening for me. Like,
Good
it's like
description. The
can had been closed. The hope can had been closed.
I love that.
Suddenly it was like, it opened up and I was feeling all this hope again of like, oh my God, like we're doing IVF and this might really work. And, we've been through so much, but maybe this will work out for us. So we did 2 rounds of IVF with that doctor. And we only through those 2 rounds had 1 embryo that was able to be transferred and did a transfer, but I didn't get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So both of those rounds were really devastating.
Yeah.
And, we were both pretty worn out after both of those. So we again took another break after that and weren't really sure what we were going to do and had to have different conversations. I think that was the first time maybe Erik had brought up us just not having kids.
Mm-hmm.
But at that moment, I was not receptive to it. I remember looking at him with an attitude and just being like, so it's just going to be you and I for like the rest of our lives.
Right.
That was like, no.
Yeah.
So I don't know if did you,
Erik, do you remember that point or do you remember thinking that?
No, I remember having a conversation, but the reason that I'm a little hesitant is because when Melissa was talking about the opening up the can of hope and all that stuff, I realized that I never had that. I had dealt with so much like disappointment and frustration and so many different aspects of life that like, I was just like, let's try IVF. And the funny thing was that opening up the can of hope thing, I don't think you really let me know that you were really full of all this hope because I really wasn't. I was like, well, let's try it, see if it works. But even then, I knew the percentage. I knew that the odds weren't in our favor. Yeah. So I never had that. And so when I brought up like maybe we need to consider the fact that we might not have kids.
Yeah,
that was sort of just matter of fact based on look at how far we've come so far, and we're doing this thing that has a 20% success rate. We might not end up with kids.
Yeah, he's more of like a realist and let's look at the facts.
That's how my husband is too. And I'm like, let's try everything. Yeah.
Completely. I'm more emotional. But he also knew that he also wanted me to feel like I had done all I needed to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Return to the Monsters, Inc. universe in the Disney Plus brand new series, Monsters at Work. It's laughter thereafter as we meet a brand new cast of monsters voiced by incredible stars such as Mindy Kaling, Henry Winkler, and of course, Ben Feldman as Tyler, a recently graduated scarer who quickly learns the only thing horrifying at Monsters, Inc. is how hilarious it is to be part of the team. Billy Crystal and John Goodman are back in their beloved roles as Mike and Sully. Monsters at Work. Original series now streaming, only on Disney Plus.
Tired of waking up hot and uncomfortable? Start sleeping cool on the Tempur-Breeze by Tempur-Pedic. It's engineered with a revolutionary cooling system that pulls excess heat away from your body to help you sleep deeper all night and wake up more refreshed every morning. During the Tempur-Pedic Summer of Sleep, save $500 on all Tempur-Breeze mattresses and experience your coolest sleep this summer with our best Breeze savings of the year. Learn more at TempurPedic.com.
So let me ask you this. Did the surgery, aside from, almost being fatal with a mishap, did it work? Like, did it make the male factor better?
So I had a catheter inserted into my male private part, into the hole. I'm trying to be graphic to let you know how painful it is.
Ouch. Yes.
All men who would hear this would be like, oh my God.
Yeah. Everyone just like crossed their legs and like,
yeah. So I had a catheter for the entire 25 days I was in the hospital. And then several days, I would say maybe another month after I came home from the hospital. So you're giving me a look. It wasn't a month.
I don't think it was that long, but you did have it when we got home. Yeah.
Yeah. It was at least a couple of weeks. So anyway, there was all kinds of like swelling and issues related to that we never really got a real, chance to see if everything healed up.
But when we got to the IVF part and you had to give your sample, it's like the quality was still good.
It's basically the same.
But I don't think anything really improved until we did acupuncture. Acupuncture actually did help.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Completely forgot about acupuncture helping.
Yeah. So because after the 2 rounds of IVF, when we had that break and we had that first child-free discussion, then we decided to just kind of look into every option, and we went to an adoption seminar and we talked about that experience. And then I was like, well, let's do some of the natural stuff we've never done. And then I heard about this amazing doctor in LA. Let's do this natural stuff. And then let's go to this doctor and see what she thinks and maybe do another treatment with her. So we lost weight. We did acupuncture over the course of a pretty long period of time. I don't know, 9 months or something.
So you're both going to acupuncture?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Every week.
Yeah.
So we were doing all of just trying to be very healthy naturally and all of that. And so then we go to this other doctor. She runs 1,000 tests because she's very thorough, trying to get a full picture. And then we decide to do a round of IVF with her. And we didn't end up with any embryos that were genetically normal. So the devastation after that was, I think of cries as being far more audible and kind of that guttural cry.
Yes.
The devastation is just so deep. And
yes.
And I think I just knew after that round that I'd hit a point where I just couldn't do anymore. I'd hit whatever my boundary was, where it was I can't go through any more physical, mental, emotional, and in every way, I've just hit every wall that I have.
Yeah.
So that was where, at that point where we were seriously talking about, child-free living being our resolution.
So were you familiar with anybody? Was there anybody in your life that had gone through infertility and then decided to live child-free? Did you have any, or did you find any people? I don't know if you were on Instagram yet, or if you'd started your podcast at this point yet, but what was
No, we definitely hadn't started a podcast.
So what was the support? What kind of support were you guys getting?
Pretty much there was none. When we were going through infertility, there were times pretty early on where I had searched online to try to find people who were childless after infertility, because the fear was so heavy. The fear of never becoming a mother was so intense, and I think drives so much of the suffering that you feel, or that I felt, that I kind of wanted to know, can I be okay if this doesn't work out? And I did find a few bloggers back then, and I don't know, maybe one book. There wasn't very much, but there was a little bit. That would have been 2012, 2013. But there wasn't much. Now, today, if you are able to go on Instagram and search certain hashtags and things, you can find a lot more resources. But there wasn't much then. And certainly when we stopped, I had never known anyone I didn't have any close friends who'd gone through infertility, period. One family member, but I didn't know anybody who left it without a child.
Yeah. So did you guys have one of those deep discussions that was we're going to stop pursuing parenthood and focus on ourselves and being a family of 2? Did you ever sit down, or was it just kind of gradual and you just both kind of came to that same place?
Well, for me, the last round was kind of the Hail Mary of let's get healthy. Let's do everything we can do. We did the acupuncture, all that stuff. And then it still didn't work out. So for me, it was it was a little less emotional, because I didn't necessarily, I knew what the odds were the whole time. And so when we were dealing with all the disappointment, it wasn't some huge shock for me. And it was basically do we want to keep doing this? It hasn't been working. The odds aren't really great. Why are we continuing to do this? But for Melissa, it was more of an emotional, no, this is my life's calling to be a mother, blah, blah, blah.
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to be
Yada,
that
yada,
dismissive.
yada, whatever.
Yeah,
No, but seriously,
exactly.
that is kind of how she was. And for me, being a parent was not necessarily this idea of sunshine and roses.
Right.
So it was like, this isn't looking like this is in the cards for us. Maybe we can, try something else.
Yeah. And to answer your question, we did have, I think it was more than one conversation, but I feel like within a month of that last IVF, we had made a very, very serious permanent decision that we were done.
Well, it was really, let's be clear, it wasn't my decision. It wasn't like I convinced her to stop, because I knew if I told her or I was the one who was responsible for saying this is over, that it wasn't going to be helpful or good for us long term. It needed to be. I was willing to do another one if she wanted to do another one.
Yeah, he was like, "Are you sure? Like, are you sure you're going to be okay?" And and I never changed my mind after that. I could have, but I didn't.
And I knew that it was, emotional, and there were other things involved. So I wasn't trying to be some robot dictator telling her to stop.
Yeah. So Melissa, can you talk us through a little bit more about how you finally came to like peace with that decision? Because I know that there's people out there listening, and I've talked about this a lot before in various, like in my fertility rally support groups and stuff, and with other people I've interviewed. It's one of those things where I think people sometimes are scared to pivot and scared to change course. And you get so laser focused on this end goal of having a baby, and that's the happy ending, that you don't realize that there are other happy endings too. So how did you, if you don't mind, like talking me through a little bit how you, finally made that decision and then like came to be at peace with it?
I think for me, it had to do with constantly checking in with myself and how I was feeling throughout all of the years of infertility, which is about 6 years. And when I would check in and see how I was feeling, like there were times after like maybe even the second round of IVF or after Erik's surgery where I really felt like, this isn't going to happen for us. We're done. But then, a month or two later, I would feel differently. It was like, no, I really like, what about this or what about this? Like I really wasn't. When I check in with myself, it was like, no, I'm not really done with this. I really want to pursue other avenues. But after checking in with myself, like after that last one, I really felt like my life is the way that I internally felt was like my life is trying to get me to accept something. And I'm pushing against it because I'm afraid. But maybe I need to embrace it. I really felt like the way I've described it in the past is like I'm banging my head against a wall and I just can't keep banging my head against that wall anymore. Like the wall's not going to move. And for me, I just felt like, and I think also what we went through with Erik changed my perspective on life. And I felt like was asking myself in those check-ins, like how many more years of my life do I want to give to this heartache and this roller coaster ride? And how much more of myself emotionally and mental health wise and physically do I want to give to this process? And at that point, I didn't feel like I wanted to give any more years to it. It had already sucked up so much of my 30s. I was about to turn 40 and I just thought, I just don't want to do this anymore. And I want us to be able to actually have our next decade together be full of like new possibilities and finding new things to fill these spaces that before were being filled with infertility and all this struggle. So that's what it was for me. It was really checking in with myself and feeling, what do I really want right now? And let me look at this from a bigger perspective.
So once you guys both kind of came to that decision, did you feel a sense of relief almost?
I definitely felt a sense of relief.
Yeah.
There's a lot of emotions going around, but the initial one was definitely a sense of a burden being lifted and a relief that I don't have to think about this anymore. As far as like the making appointments and the shots and the and the taking your temperature and all that crap.
Totally.
It's like, I'm done with that.
You're right. In that it's such a time suck. And then all of a sudden it's been 6 years and you're like, what just happened?
And like so much of your thought process every day is just consumed with it.
Totally.
It's just so difficult. And so I definitely felt a relief from that. Did you, Erik?
I don't think I would say that it was relief, because I knew that for Melissa, it was this like devastating like mindset shift. And so like it wasn't relief, because like I don't know.
Because you were concerned about me.
I was like, okay, now we're in this new world, and like I don't want to say this was her thing, but it was her thing. Like the IVF and the decisions, and I really want to be a mother and all that stuff. And I was like, yeah, I want to do it too, but you know, things don't always work out. And so if it doesn't work out, like I didn't have that same level of hope and optimism that she did. So then when we decided to stop, it wasn't relief, because I didn't have as much invested in it as she did. Then I became concerned for her once we made that decision to stop.
Concerned about what?
Like, is this death of a dream, death of her ideal of what life is going to be so devastating to her that she'll never get over it, or that, you know, it'll be very difficult for us to move forward. That was one of my concerns. So it wasn't relief. That was definitely not the emotion I was experiencing.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. So what did life look like? Okay, so this, you know, the kind of the closing of this chapter, as it were, you know, I know that you guys have lived a life, and reading some of your Instagram posts and stuff, it's like you've got loads of love and learning and laughter. So tell me, what does life look like now?
Well, we are a little over 4 years now since that first decision.
Okay.
And I definitely went through a lot of grief, and especially the first year and a half. But now it's interesting, because when I think about my life now, if I look at the things that I still struggle with in my life, they're not connected to me not being a mother. Except for occasionally when my grief when something will get triggered. Like there will always be times in my life where that grief gets triggered and that emotion comes up. I think it's just a permanent part of myself that I've accepted. Just like any grief, you know, you can be around something that triggers it and the emotion comes up, and you know, you may not last for very long. Or
what was like an example of a recent trigger, or maybe not recent, but like your last one you can think of?
2 people getting pregnant during the pandemic accidentally. Like quote unquote.
And being like, oh my God, we just looked at each other and it happened. Or like, quarantine babies, people, like all that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's a trigger for me, is when people find out they're pregnant, and especially if they weren't trying, because it's like, so like, it's like they're like a unicorn. Like, I'm like, how I know. I can't even like imagine that. Like, it's so beyond my experience.
Right. It's so true.
Yeah. And I think what it does is it validates everything I went through. And I think that's why it triggers the grief. Because it's like, you went through freaking hell.
Yeah.
And they just had sex, acting like whoopsies.
Right.
So it kind of is like, it validates. And I think that's why it triggers it, you know? Yeah. And so, but it doesn't, I'm not down for the count when it happens, usually for a long period of time. It's usually, I bounce back pretty quickly, but so it does still get triggered. But I will say, back to my other point, most of the things that I struggle with in life are things that I struggled with before that, you know, like body image, you know, things that I've dealt with that are lifelong struggles that have nothing to do with infertility.
Oh yeah. You and me, we could have a conversation about that, a whole different podcast. I've been there.
I mean, that's been since I'm a teenager. That's totally lifelong work. So those things aren't really related. Most of the time, what I struggle with isn't really related to being child-free after infertility. So it's really nice to get to that place.
Yeah.
And also to have like the mind shift is how we talk about it, because it's an identity shift afterwards.
Right.
I think of myself as a child-free person, and we have a family of 2 and our dog. And like, I don't think of myself anymore as being like, usually as being infertile, or it's just, I'm a child-free person and this is my life. And so we're in a very different place than we were 4 years ago.
Erik, what do you think has been like the greatest part of making this decision and you know, kind of pivoting and living the life as you guys are living it now?
I think just what Melissa said is pretty accurate. I think that we had to deal with the disappointment / grief. And that took a while. Like, that's actually what led us to do our podcast, is that we felt so out of sorts. Lost. Like, what are we doing? Like,
where do we go from here?
And the thing is, like, I said this and I say it all the time. Like, I was trying to figure out, where are all these people who are the 80% of people who aren't successful with infertility treatments? Where are they? We can't find them. Mm-hmm. We're not hearing their voices. All we hear about is the people who ended up with kids and are successful. And I'm like, they got to be out there somewhere.
Yeah.
And so that was it's weird. We started a podcast looking for other people.
Right.
Like hoping other people would maybe talk back to us.
It had only been like 5 months, 6 months, I think, since we had made our decision that we started the podcast. Mm-hmm. We were like, we're going to talk through this, and hopefully if any of you are out there, reach out to us.
Right. Yeah. That's why I started mine too, or this one, was because I was like, I need same with me. Like, it was after I had finally had my son through IVF, but I still was craving these stories and these people and was just like, where are you? Like,
right. Yeah.
So do you find that the community has grown, or like at least you found more people along the way over the last couple of years?
Yeah, that's been the biggest thing, is we've reached out. By us reaching out, people have talked back to us, and we've learned a ton about what life is like. And like, I think that the biggest thing for everybody is just, am I normal? Mm-hmm. And so they hear our stories and they feel, listeners, they feel normal, and they give us information, write us letters, and we go, okay, there's somebody in Sweden who's going through this too. And then that makes Melissa and us feel a little more normal. Mm-hmm. And so we've also just got a lot of perspective on why it bothers us so much. Like, and what we've concluded is that, like, this idea of not being normal or not being like other people is so devastating. Being left out is such a devastating thing. And like, that's what binds us all together. Mm-hmm. And it's a real human experience to feel that. Mm-hmm. And so, like, in a sense, it takes a while to get over it, and you do grieve it. But then after a while, for us, it gave us comfort. That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like he said, there's that, you have to get comfortable with being different and kind of countercultural. And that takes a while for a lot of people. Not everybody wanted to be that way. They didn't want to be out of the box. We wanted, and it's difficult when you feel like everyone else is going past you and everyone else is going on to these other steps in life, and you feel like you're left behind and you have to make your own path. Mm-hmm. That's something that takes a while to get used to. But seeing more of a community, getting emails from around the world, seeing an Instagram community grow now, is definitely really helpful.
Yeah. And the Child Free Collective. And I've had a bunch of people on my show too, who are child free. Have you guys ever talked to Ruth Gordon?
No, well, just through Instagram, like a couple of DMs.
Yeah. You should have her on your show. She's awesome.
Yeah. She's pretty funny. I'm glad that message is getting out there more now, but it's true, because one of the things that I always say about that is that when it comes to infertility, we received a medical diagnosis. So this isn't like a competition that we all entered and we just don't give up, keep going so you can win the competition. Like, this is a medical diagnosis. Right. Like, this is something that is a medical diagnosis that doesn't have a guaranteed cure, so to speak. And so if you choose to at some point accept it and move forward without kids, that's not giving up. That's I'm accepting this medical diagnosis and I'm choosing to move forward.
Right. And you're choosing a different kind of a happy ending.
Yeah. It's really changing your perspective. And it's another reason why it's very hard to do, is because we're raised in a culture that is so infused with messages that our worth as women comes in being mothers. And you rarely hear, narratives that are different from that. And so it's when you're going through infertility and you're terrified that you're not going to be a mom, because you're thinking, well, who am I going to be if I'm not a mom? Like, what's my future going to be like if I don't have that? Because we don't see that and we don't hear about it. So I really appreciate people like you who have started, having guests on their podcasts and platforms who are talking about this, because so many people don't want to talk about it.
No, it's such a big part of the story. I mean, Katie Seppi was on when I first launched a couple years ago, she was the first one I talked to. And it was actually because she reached out to me and was like, yo, there's another part of the story that you're missing. And here it, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I don't know if she said yo, but yeah, I mean, I think it's so important to share stories like yours. I would love to wrap it up, guys, with just, if in case anybody is listening and, is kind of thinking of going the route that you guys went, the childless route, child-free. I see, again, I don't know if is it childless, child-free? Do you guys?
It just depends on the person. We use both terms.
You use both. Okay. Because I never want to say the wrong thing,
There's no great perfect term.
Yeah.
Like, we don't even like childless and child-free, but we just picked child-free because it sounded more positive.
Yeah. Do you say like child-free not by choice or child-free by choice or just child-free?
It just we say everything.
Okay.
Like, we're not that picky. Some people are really particular with their terms. Right. We usually just say child-free or child-free after infertility, but sometimes we say childless not by choice. Yeah. I mean, we're like, whatever.
Okay.
Sometimes we just say we don't have kids.
Yeah.
so we're not that picky.
Okay. But my point being, sorry, I got on a tangent there. If somebody's listening and, might be wanting to go child-free, what would you say to somebody, not to persuade them either way, but just in terms of life after infertility, that it can be great, like what would your, I guess, kind of advice or just overarching thoughts on what you guys have been through? What would that be?
Well, one thing that I would like people to know, I heard somebody say this one time and it really resonated with me, that, don't presume to know your future self because you haven't met her yet. And you sometimes are so afraid of like what you would be like in a certain situation, but you never really know until you're there. And I never thought that I could be content and happy as a child-free woman and not as a mother. But I didn't know my future self when I had those fears.
Wow. And I just got the chills.
With everything that I've been through, it's changed my perspective. It's changed me and who I am. And I found out how resilient I really am that I didn't know before. And so for someone, if they're listening and they're struggling with infertility, you don't need to feel afraid of not having kids because you are stronger and more resilient than you know. And there is support out there, and we're out there, and other people are out there that can provide you some support and comfort if that is what you choose.
All right. Thanks so much for listening. And thanks again to Melissa and Erik. Guys, if you have not yet subscribed to this podcast and you are a fan, I would urge you to do so that you get the episodes right when they publish on either Wednesday or Thursday morning, depending on the week. Also, if you have 2 seconds to go do a rating and a review, that really helps us get noticed in this ever-expanding field of podcasts so we can reach more people. And finally, if you are going through infertility or family building in a non-traditional way, please check out fertilityrally.com, which is my passion project with Blair from Fab Fertility. We are a community, we've got content, we've got curated events, and we are there to support you no matter what you're going through. So let me know if you have any questions, but definitely check it out, thefertilityrally.com, or on Instagram at fertilityrally. All right, thanks. Talk to you next time.
Finally, a bed that senses snoring and automatically responds. Meet the Ergo Smart Base from Tempur-Pedic, our first system that detects snoring, then automatically adjusts by raising the bed. And now during the Tempur-Pedic Summer of Sleep, all Tempur-Pedic mattresses are on sale, with savings up to $500 on adjustable sets. Get your best sleep, all night, every night. Learn more at TempurPedic.com.
Your AC works overtime all summer, so be sure to replace your old air filters with new Filtry air filters. They recommend updating HVAC filters at least every 3 months all year round. So order your Filtry air filters today at Filtry.com. Let's clear the air.